thought of becoming more visible in your coaching business fills you with dread, then you are going to love today's episode of the show. Today we're talking all about how you can overcome your fear of visibility so you can confidently promote your coaching business. Let's dive in. Hi there, welcome to the Wholehearted Business Show. I'm Laura. I help heart-centered and highly sensitive health and life coaches get more clients, grow their businesses and live the best lives while they do it. And today on the show we're talking about a really big topic if you are highly sensitive and heart-centered, and that is fear of visibility, fear of being out there, fear of being seen, and how that can impact your coaching business and how we can overcome that so that we can actually confidently promote ourselves as coaches. Now, this is something that I've struggled with at different times in my journey as being first a health coach and now someone who supports other health coaches and life coaches with their businesses. It is really, really common, again, particularly if you are someone who resonates with the terms highly sensitive and heart-centered, because the idea of putting ourselves on show, the idea of, standing there and saying that we are an expert in this, like all of this stuff comes into it and it's really, really common. So today on the show, we're going to explore kind of a 4-step process to help you overcome some of those fears and be able to actually confidently be visible, confidently own who you are as a coach so that you can actually reap all the benefits of that and get more clients. I also know that a big part of that fear of visibility can be connected to social media, and we're going to explore this a little bit as we talk through today. If you want to do less on social media but still be visible and still market your coaching business, you're going to absolutely love my 4-hour marketing workflow for coaches. Go and grab it. That is based on, yes, we've got some social media in there, but using other platforms that are not social media based. So do go and check that out if you want a bit more information about how you can market yourself without necessarily having to be all over social media. Check out the link in the description and go and grab that because it will be really, really helpful. So the first step in overcoming your fear of visibility is to really sit with the fear and actually look at what's going on underneath the fear. So what I find is that when we realise that we're not being visible, that there's some blocks there, if you like, and I'm going to talk about the times when there's blocks and there's time when there's not, and we're going to explore that a little bit. Often there's something underneath that fear, and it's really about identifying what that is. Like, is it fear of being judged? Is it fear of people, coming at you because you've got an opinion that they might not agree with? Is it kind of conflict that there's a fear? Is there a fear of not being good enough? Is there a fear of not knowing the answer to all the questions? Like, kind of get under what that is and see if you can explore what that is. And a great tool for this is just to journal it out and really start to explore, okay, so I've got this fear, like what could be going on underneath that? When have I experienced a similar fear at different times in my life? And try and unpick that, because getting to the bottom of what it actually is one of the first steps that we can take to actually start to overcome it. Now, what I will say here is there are some very legitimate fears that you might have about being visible, particularly if you have a marginalised identity. And I think it's really important to validate that and to not gaslight yourself into thinking that it's a block when it's actually a very legitimate fear. Now, how we overcome some of those things is much more difficult and complex because we can't necessarily, we can't think our way out of feeling fearful of sharing something online if we have a marginalised identity where we could be attacked for that. And I think it's very important to recognise that, like I said, that is a thing. So if that is you, overcoming that is going to look different to some of the things I'm talking about today, because we can't, it's not a block that you can work through. It is a legitimate thing. And sometimes what it comes down to is kind of like finding the places that feel the safest. And again, we're going to look at elements of that as we go through. So that might be helpful for you. But I just wanted to really highlight that because I think, very often coaches can say that things are blocks and say that things are mindset blocks and mindset work, but actually there are things that are legitimate fears because there's a legitimate reason why that might actually happen. So it's really important to just validate yourself if that is you. Once you have started to identify your fears and what's underneath them, you can start and process what they look like. And again, journaling's a fantastic tool for this. So is EFT to work through it if you know that it's a block. Something that I often do is just kind of go to the worst case scenario, which sounds kind of negative, but I find it really helpful to think, if I've got this fear of posting on Instagram, for example, because I'm worried that someone's going to call me out for an opinion that I have, or someone's going to say that, I don't know as much as I think I do. Like, first of all, that's clearly imposter syndrome, and that's a whole thing that you can kind of find resources online that can help you work through it. But also kind of go to the worst case scenario and think, well, okay, so if someone did challenge me about something and I didn't know the answer, how would I respond to that? How would I react? And usually it's actually not the end of the world if that happened, and usually I would be quite confident that I could work through it. Now, that's just the way that my brain works. So I quite like looking at the worst case scenarios because usually they are a lot less than what we've actually made it out to be in our brain. So we can process that and kind of think about, okay, so I've got this fear, but actually what would happen, the worst case scenario. Another side of that is to actually look at the best case scenario. So actually, what if this never happened? And what if I was actually being visible? Like, what difference could that make to my business and my life, which is what we're going to move on to in a second. So you can look at both of those different angles, but anything that you can do to start kind of going through this so that you can feel, and I mean, a lot of this for me is around how you feel safe to be visible. I think when you think of it in that way, about your feeling safe in your nervous system to actually be seen and show up, it kind of puts a slightly different like angle on things. And sometimes I think that's quite helpful to think of it in that way. You know, what do I need to do, or what can I support myself with in order to feel more safe being visible in my coaching business? And that can be a really, really helpful way to think about it. Another tool that you can use around kind of dissolving some of those fears and those blocks is also reframing things as well. So often we have a certain viewpoint on something, but if we can look from another viewpoint, if we can reframe that particular fear, that can be another really great way to loosen the thread and kind of start to pull that apart too. So process those fears, identify what is at the root of them if you can, and just to say, you know, this can be long time work. You know, this is work that I've been doing for years. It took me a long time to actually sit down and do a podcast. It took me a really, really, really long time because there was all sorts of different stuff going on there. It took me a really long time before I felt confident sharing that I was a coach in front of friends and family, like all sorts of different things. So, you know, just go easy on yourself. It can take time to process a lot of this stuff because, again, this is like safety stuff, do you know what I mean? And if you don't feel safe, it's going to be really, really difficult. So we've got to balance all these things out. But identifying those fears, working through them, journaling, using EFT, going to the worst case scenario, those are just a few of the things that you can try to help you start to kind of process. And it's almost like you've got a big ball of thread that you kind of need to unpick and loosen that thread out so that you can move forward. The second step is to reconnect with why you want to be visible in the first place. So this is a really good one, and this is quite helpful and quite motivating because whenever we are in a position of having to move out of our comfort zone, you know, by definition, we are going to get uncomfortable, and sometimes we need a motivating factor that is going to push us to do that, and it has to be a strong enough motivating factor to, you know, in order to want to do it. So actually looking at, you know, the benefits, like what would being more visible mean to me, my business and my life? Like what could be the results of that? You know, and for most people, it's more clients, which would be more impact in the world, which would be more money, which would potentially be more freedom, more feelings of safety, more enjoyment in your life, you know, some really big, amazing things. So actually reconnecting with that can be so helpful. Another layer of this that I like to bring in is reconnecting with your core values. So this is a big part of the work that I do with my clients, and just kind of my whole perspective on growing a business is to reconnect with your core values that kind of are the way that you live and show up in your life. The other variations of that kind of work, I've talked about Danielle Laporte's their desire map and your core desire feelings. I've also talked about identifying your authentic code, which is something that is covered in the program To Be Magnetic, of which I'm a big fan of. I'll link to the episode of the show that I did around manifestation, where I talk a bit more about that process. But they have these different kind of angles on core values work. And I think reconnecting with that as well, and thinking about visibility through the lens of your core values, can be really helpful as well. Because sometimes, again, you know, there's fears, but there's also blocks that are less to do with I am scared of this and this feels unsafe, to being more like this isn't aligned for me actually. You know, and you might feel that there's a fear of social media there, but maybe it's not a fear. Maybe it's like, this feels gross because it completely goes against like my values as a human being. And therefore it's not a block to be worked through. It's actually, you know, a personal alignment issue that needs to be addressed, and not addressed, but needs to be worked with, not worked through or over. You actually need to work with that. So it can be really helpful to do that and just kind of reconnect with, you know, what does visibility look like for me in terms of my core values, and also kind of what are the benefits of actually pushing myself out of my comfort zone and being a bit more visible, because usually they're pretty massive, and that can be a big motivating factor to help you show up. The third step is to build your confidence with being visible. Now, I heard this great bit of advice, and it really stuck with me, and I think it's so true. And that is that often we think we need to get confident before we can take the action, and it's actually the other way around. So we tend to think, oh, when I'm confident, I will do this. When I'm more confident, I will do that. It doesn't work like that. The way that it works is that you do the thing, and that in the doing of the thing is what makes you feel more confident. So it's a really good reminder that through this process, you're going to have to be brave. And this is, again, like an energy that I really enjoy tapping into. And, I just think most of us who are starting coaching businesses are, in some way, are quite brave because we're doing something that's a bit different, that's outside the norm, that comes with an element of risk, that does require us to push out of our comfort zones. So tune into that braveness, if you like, and know that you are not going to get confident if you don't take some steps. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to take a big step and completely obliterate your nervous system because you've done something massive that feels really scary and unsafe. It can be small steps, but in the taking of the steps and of the doing of the action, that is where the confidence will grow, not the other way around. So if you're sat there waiting for the confidence to kick in, like as a result of working through your fears, like that might loosen it. Working through some of those fears may make things a little bit easier, but ultimately you're not necessarily going to feel as confident as perhaps you would want to. There has to be some action taken to get to the place of more confidence. And it's such a helpful thing to remember because, again, if you're going to sit there and wait for the confidence to come, you could be sitting for a really, really long time. And the fourth and final step is to come up with your own visibility scale. So this kind of connects back in with kind of a little bit of what we talked about in all of these different stages, but certainly with the confidence thing. And what I want you to do is I want you to think about the spaces online and in person where you can be visible and be seen in your business. And I want you to think about the spaces, first of all, like that might be the actual platforms online, it could be the actual physical spaces, but the places, the spaces where you can be visible. And then I also want you to think about the forms of that visibility. So whether that's written, whether that's audio, whether that's you being on video, whether that's you doing live video, whether that's you speaking somewhere, whether that's you networking, like what those formats of that visibility could take. So I want you to think about those two things, and I want you to rank them in order of, and I was going to say scariness, but let's rank them in order of safety. So we're going to start out with what feels the safest for both of those two different sides of things. So like I say, the spaces and the places and the formats of the visibility that would take. And I want you to rank that in terms of what feels the safest to what feels the least safe. And that is going to be your visibility scale. And it's going to be personal to you because generally speaking, again, what most people will find is that written content feels quite safe. Writing on your blog feels quite safe perhaps. Writing emails might feel relatively safe. Speaking at a public event might feel terrifying. There's generally, most people will have similar looking visibility skills, but it's not to say they're all going to be the same, which is why I'm suggesting that you do this yourself. And the idea is that you will gradually work up your visibility scale and increase your confidence as you do so. And that is going to lead to you not only becoming more visible, but doing visibility in a way that is going to have better results. Because ultimately, and especially right now, and I'm going to talk about this at some point soon, I think on the show, it is not enough to not be showing your face. It is not enough to not be sharing your voice. Unfortunately, it's probably not going to cut it. Like, yes, there's probably ways that you can get some kind of traction. And, again, I'm certainly here saying that you can market your business without social media. But I think that it's very, 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 very difficult to market your coaching business and get clients without some form of more outward kind of, quote unquote, scary visibility and a certain level of actually being seen by people. You're going to need to tap into that, and that's going to need to happen. So the visibility scale is a great way to work through this in a way that you can actually measure your progress. You can think, well, when I first started out looking at this, I was writing on my own blog, and that felt great, and I did that, and I kind of got comfortable with that. And then I decided to put like the audio version of the blog. So I just spoke the blog and I embedded that in my blog so people can listen to me talk about it. It's not an actual podcast. It's on the Apple Store. It's still quite private, but it's there on the blog. And then also, the next thing that I did is I did some little videos for my email list. Like, kind of think about the spaces and places and the type of content and like, kind of mix and match those in. This is also about your core values as well, because again, there's no need for you to put on your visibility scale social media, for example, if that is never going to feel aligned for you. So again, tap into those core values and what is aligned for you and just leave them out. They don't have to be relevant, but think about what is relevant, what is within your, what is within your values, what does feel aligned, and put that into your visibility scale and challenge yourself a little bit to gradually work up the visibility scale. You will increase in confidence, you will be seen more, you will get more clients, you will make more money, you will have all of the benefits from running a fantastic coaching business where you get to have an amazing impact and help lots and lots of people. And that will be the fantastic result. So I really hope that's helped. I'm going to just quickly recap the 4 steps. So the first one is to get comfortable with the fear, kind of figure out what is going on with this fear, get beneath it, what is the root of that fear, and work through that, use some tools to kind of work through that. Also recognize when something is not a fear or a block and it's actually a legitimate fear, because that is different, and don't gaslight yourself into thinking that it's not, because it is. The second step is to reconnect with why you want to be visible, and also things like your core desire feelings, your core values, so that you can kind of get a sense of this is why I want to be visible, this is why this is important to me, because that is going to motivate you to take action. The next step is to build your confidence and to remember that confidence does not come before you take action. You have to take action in order to feel more confident. And then finally, you're going to create your own visibility scale. You're going to look at the spaces and places and rank them from safest to least safe. You're going to look at the formats of that visibility, the way in which you can be visible, and again, rank that from feeling safe to not feeling safe, or however you want to label it, whatever feels good to you. It doesn't have to be safe or not safe. And then you're going to challenge yourself to gradually work up that visibility scale. So I really hope that's been helpful. And like I said at the start, if you do want to explore this and you want to explore perhaps not so much of the social media side of things, but with the option to do so, then do check out my 4-hour marketing workflow. It's completely free. The link is in the description, and that will take you through a process of creating marketing content that does not necessarily have to rely on social media, that does require some visibility, but hopefully it'll give you an idea of how that can look. So go and download that. And I really hope that's been helpful, everyone. I'd love to know what your opinion is on this episode of the show. Has it been helpful? What does your visibility scale look like? Please let me know. If you're watching on YouTube, please leave me a comment and let me know. If you are listening to the podcast, please click the link in the description where you can leave me a little message and tell me there, and I'd love to hear more. Okay, guys, I will be back next week. You take care. Have a wonderful week. See you soon. Bye.